And, to start things off today, I actually want you to try something really quick.
Oh, jumping right in with an exercise. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're listening, and, well, assuming you're not driving a car right now, just look down at your hand. Seriously, hold your hand up in front of your face and just make a fist.
Okay, I'm doing it too.
Awesome. Now open it, and now make a fist again. Now ask yourself, who just did that? What exactly commanded those fingers to curl into your palm?
I mean, the intuitive reflex answer for basically anyone is going to be, well, I did, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
me. My conscious mind made a choice and my body just obeyed.
Right. It feels like the ultimate unshakable proof of your own agency. You decide something, and the physical world bends to your will.
It's the most foundational assumption of the human experience, really. We just walk through life fully believing we are the undisputed authors of our actions and, by extension, the architects of our destinies.
Exactly. But today, our mission is to completely dismantle that assumption. We are going to fundamentally deconstruct the whole concept of control and causality in your life.
And we have a really fascinating stack of sources to help us do this.
We really do. On one side, we're looking at an excerpt on behavioral economics that examines the invisible and often just completely ignored forces of luck and risk.
Yeah. And on the other side, we are pairing that with a foundational text on the philosophy of mind.
Right, and the goal here is to bridge these two sources to answer one massive, frankly, uncomfortable question. How much control do we really have over our external outcomes? And honestly, even wilder than that, how much control do our minds actually have over our physical bodies?
It really is a journey from the absolute macro to the microscopic. I mean, we're going to start out by looking at these massive, swirling socioeconomic forces that dictate our external success or failure.
And then we're going to shrink all the way down, right? Down to the individual neural pathways in our own brains to see if we are even the authors of that fist you just made.
It's going to get weird.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this. I want you to think about your greatest success in life, like the achievement you are most proud of. You got it.
That's a good feeling to hold on to.
It is. But now I want you to think about your biggest, most painful failure. The one that, still stings when you think about it.
Ouch. Less fun.
Yeah, less fun for sure. But hold both of those in your head because by the end of this deep dive, you are going to view them in a completely new, probably slightly uncomfortable light.
We should probably start with the external world.
Yeah, let's do that. There's this brilliant framework from NYU professor Scott Galloway found in the text, and it acts as the perfect anchor here. He has this rule, quote, "Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems."
What's fascinating here is how that single sentence reframes our entire socioeconomic reality. Like
Yeah.
it introduces luck and risk not as opposites, but as identical siblings.
Identical siblings. I love that phrasing.
Right, because they're the exact same mechanism, just producing different polarities of outcome. The core argument from the text is that every single outcome in life is guided by forces other than your individual effort.
Which, that immediately triggers a defensive reaction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If someone tells me my success isn't just about my hard work, I want to argue back.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to be like, look at the hours I put in. Look at the sacrifices I made.
Of course you do. We all do. But, just think about the sheer mathematics of existence for a second. We live on a planet with over 7 billion other active decision-making humans.
It's a lot of moving parts.
It's a massively complex, nonlinear system. If every person makes just, let's say, 10 meaningful decisions a day, that is 70 billion chaotic variables injected into the system every single 24 hours.
That's a great way to visualize it. It's like, imagine playing a board game, but there are 7 billion other players on the exact same board.
Oh, what a nightmare.
Right. And there are infinite dice rolls happening every millisecond. You might make a brilliant, highly calculated move with your piece. But if 3 billion people accidentally bump the table at the exact same moment, Your piece is falling off the board regardless of your amazing strategy.
Exactly. The text points out that the accidental compounding impact of actions completely outside of your control is statistically bound to be far more consequential than the tiny handful of conscious decisions you actually make.
And that reality is deeply unsettling, especially for the listener to accept. When we judge our own financial success or, our career trajectory, we desperately crave a clean narrative of cause and effect.
We want the story to make sense.
Exactly. If I'm wealthy, I want to believe it is a direct one-to-one result of my intelligence and my grit. And if I am poor, well, society wants to believe it is a direct result of my mistakes.
We want to completely ignore the massive invisible roulette wheel that is spinning underneath that board game.
We really do. But to accept luck and risk as identical siblings means acknowledging that your personal agency is, at best, a co-author in your life story. And honestly, very often it's just a minor footnote.
So we should probably stress test this framework with a real example.
Yeah, let's apply it to the ultimate poster child for meritocracy and individual brilliance, Bill Gates.
The classic self-made billionaire story.
Right. And I want to push back on the premise for a second because we all know the broad strokes of Gates's life. He is staggeringly smart.
Unquestionably.
And he worked incredibly hard. I mean, he spent thousands of hours coding when other kids were sleeping. Luck didn't write the code for Microsoft DOS. So how can we attribute his empire to a roulette wheel?
Well, because extraordinary effort is a necessary condition for success, but it is rarely a sufficient one on its own. Brilliance needs a playground.
Ooh, brilliance needs a playground. That's good.
And to understand Gates's playground, we have to look at a highly specific, mathematically absurd chain of events that occurred at Lakeside School in Seattle in 1968.
Right. And we really need to give some historical context here. Because in 1968, computers were not something you found in homes or, high schools.
Not at all. They were massive, room-sized mainframes.
Exactly. Owned by the military or giant corporations or maybe elite university graduate programs.
Precisely. And the anomaly of Lakeside begins with a man named Bill Dougal. He was a World War II Navy pilot who became a math and science teacher there.
Okay, a Navy pilot turned high school teacher.
Yeah, and because of his military background, he had a very specific, pragmatic worldview. He believed that traditional book study was just insufficient. He thought students needed real-world, bleeding-edge experience.
Which was pretty progressive for the 60s.
Very. He recognized that the future would be dictated by computers, and he really wanted his high school students to have access to one.
But foresight doesn't buy hardware. You need capital. And this is where the sheer absurd randomness of luck enters the equation.
Because he couldn't exactly just ask the school board for a mainframe.
Right. So Dougal petitioned the Lakeside School Mothers Club to use the proceeds from their annual rummage sale.
A rummage sale. It's incredible.
They had raised about $3,000. And he convinced them to use that rummage sale money to lease a teletype Model 30 computer.
Which was then hooked up via telephone lines to a General Electric mainframe terminal for something called computer time-sharing.
And we really need to pause and explain the mechanics of time-sharing, because this is the technological hinge upon which Gates's entire advantage swings.
It really is. Before 1965, the industry standard was something called batch processing.
Oh man, batch processing sounds brutal.
It was. If you wrote a program, you had to punch it into physical cards. Then you'd hand that stack of cards to a technician in a white coat, and you just waited.
You literally couldn't touch the machine yourself.
No. The technician would feed it into the mainframe, and you might get your results back the next day. If you made a single typo, like one missing semicolon, you found out 24 hours later.
The feedback loop was agonizingly slow. It was essentially coding via snail mail.
Exactly. But time-sharing completely revolutionized that. Time-sharing allowed multiple users to interact with a single mainframe simultaneously via remote terminals.
So you typed a command, and the machine responded almost instantly.
Right. The feedback loop shrank from 24 hours to milliseconds. And keep in mind, time-sharing had only been invented in 1965.
And this is 1968. By 1968, most elite university graduate programs didn't have a computer anywhere near as advanced as the one Lakeside school just bought with rummage sale money.
And they installed it in a junior high school. And it wasn't even part of the general curriculum, it was just an independent study program.
So in 8th grade, Bill Gates and his friend Paul Allen could just toy away with this bleeding-edge technology late into the night.
And on weekends, they could rack up their mythical 10,000 hours of practice when literally no one else their age on the planet had the physical infrastructure to do so.
Let's break down the staggering statistics of this, because the math is what truly illustrates the magnitude of the luck here.
The numbers are wild.
In 1968, according to the text, there were roughly 303 million high school-age people in the world.
Okay, 303 million. And of those, about 18 million lived in the United States.
The funnel arrows.
It does. About 270,000 of them lived in Washington state. A little over 100,000 of them lived in the Seattle area.
Right.
And only about 300 of them attended Lakeside School.
So you start with 303 million and you end with 300. It is a literal 1 in a million advantage.
1 in a million.
1 in a million high school-age students globally attended the only school that had the combination of an ex-Navy pilot's foresight and a Mother's Club rummage sale, capable of funding a time-sharing terminal.
And Bill Gates just happened to be one of those 300 kids.
Now, this doesn't diminish his genius. He was primed for success.
Right. It just demonstrates that to build a trillion-dollar company, your personal brilliance must violently collide with a statistical anomaly.
And Gates himself has never been shy about this reality. In a 2005 speech to the school, he explicitly stated, quote, "If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft."
His skill was the engine, but that 1 in a million access was the fuel.
But, if luck is the wind blowing you forward, risk is the unseen cliff edge dropping away in the dark.
That's a great way to transition because we have to talk about the dark mirror of the Lakeside story.
We do, because the narrative we always hear is about a duo, right? Bill Gates and Paul Allen.
Always those two.
But there wasn't just a duo of computer prodigies at Lakeside. There was a third member of the gang, a kid named Kent Evans.
Kent Evans is the absolute embodiment of risk in this framework. He and Bill Gates were best friends in 8th grade.
By Gates' own admission, Kent was the best student in the class.
They were completely inseparable. Gates still remembers Kent's phone number decades later, 525-7851. They talked constantly.
And Kent wasn't just tagging along either. He was a peer in every intellectual sense.
Oh, absolutely. The administration at Lakeside literally tasked these two children to build a complex computer program to solve the school's class scheduling maze.
Which is crazy. Think about the cognitive weight of that. Balancing hundreds of students, teachers, room capacities, and prerequisites on a 1960s mainframe.
And they did it successfully. Kent shared Gates's massive ambition, too. Gates remembers Kent carrying around a big professional lawyer's briefcase to school.
They were always scheming about the future. They debated whether they were going to be CEOs, generals, or ambassadors.
They fully intended to conquer the world together. Kent Evans had the exact same skills, the exact same drive, and the exact same 1 in a million luck of being at Lakeside as Bill Gates.
But Kent experienced luck's identical sibling. He experienced risk. Before he even graduated high school, Kent Evans was killed in a mountaineering accident.
It's just devastating.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the mathematics of that tragedy.
Right, the numbers again.
Every year, there are only about 36 mountaineering deaths in the entire United States. The odds of being killed on a mountain in high school are roughly 1 in a million.
It is the exact same magnitude of force. Bill Gates experienced a 1 in a million stroke of luck to find that computer terminal. Kent Evans experienced a 1 in a million stroke of risk to lose his life on that mountain.
Identical forces, working in completely opposite directions.
And think about how our culture consumes these outcomes.
Right. We write endless books, we produce documentaries, we study every morning routine and reading habit of Bill Gates.
But there are no business case studies written about Kent Evans. Why?
Because surviving the roulette wheel makes you visible. Losing makes you invisible. We suffer from massive survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias is the crucial psychological flaw here. When we look at the people who ran the gauntlet of the 7 billion player board game and won, we look only at their actions.
We assume their victory was entirely born of their own strategy.
We don't see the invisible graveyard of the Kent Evanses, the people who had the exact same strategy, the exact same skill, the exact same work ethic, but just got knocked off the board by a random, devastating dice roll.
Which brings us right into the psychology of how we actually judge success and failure. Because, if luck and risk are truly this powerful, if they are the dominant forces in the universe, why do we dedicate so much psychological energy to ignoring them?
Well, because acknowledging them threatens our ego and our sense of safety. There's a great anecdote in the text involving Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist.
Oh, I love this part.
He was once asked what he wanted to know about investing that we can't currently know, and his answer was brilliant in its simplicity. He said he wanted to know, quote, the exact role of luck in successful outcomes.
It's a profound answer because intuitively we all know luck is there. If you ask a room full of people, hey, out of 1 million investors, is it mathematically possible that a few of them become billionaires just by sheer dumb random chance? Everyone would say yes.
Right. Logically, it's possible.
But socially, it is entirely unacceptable to point that out in practice. Try walking up to a self-made billionaire and telling them they just won a cosmic lottery.
They will be deeply offended.
Oh, yeah. It sounds bitter. It sounds jealous.
There's a fascinating piece of research by economist Bhaskar Mazumdar that highlights this cognitive dissonance perfectly. He conducted a massive study showing that incomes among brothers are more highly correlated than height or weight.
Wait, really? More than height?
Yes. Statistically, if you are rich and tall, your brother is more likely to also be rich than he is to be tall.
That is wild.
It heavily links your financial trajectory back to the socioeconomic status of your parents. The ultimate uncontrollable lottery of birth.
But try explaining that to two wealthy brothers. They will vehemently deny it.
Oh, they'll give you a detailed list of 50 reasons why their individual grit, their late nights, and their specific business acumen got them there.
They completely erase the starting line from their narrative.
And this psychological blind spot creates a massive, highly destructive double standard when it comes to how we view failure.
Think about the asymmetry there. When we look at other people's failures, like a friend whose business went bankrupt or a colleague who got fired, we almost always attribute it to bad decisions.
We say they didn't try hard enough, or they expanded too quickly, or they just weren't smart enough.
We do this because it provides a clean, simple story. It makes the world feel safe. The subconscious logic is basically, they failed because they did something wrong, therefore, if I just do the right things, I am safe from failure.
But when we fail, the narrative flips completely.
It totally does. When it's our own bankruptcy or our own mispromotion, suddenly we become highly nuanced experts in the dark side of risk.
We blame macroeconomic trends, bad timing, a dishonest partner, an unpredictable market event.
We attribute others' failures to character flaws, but our own failures to environmental hazards, solely to protect our own egos.
And this blurred line brings up some of the most mind-bending business paradoxes. Because the line between being a visionary genius and being a reckless criminal is often entirely dependent on whether you got lucky or unlucky.
Right. Take Cornelius Vanderbilt. He's ruthlessly expanding his railroad empire in the 19th century. One of his advisors nervously leans in and tells him that literally every transaction he is agreeing to breaks the laws of the state of New York.
And Vanderbilt famously snaps back, "My God, John, you don't suppose you can run a railroad in accordance with the statutes of the state of New York, do you?"
And historically, how is that quote treated? Because Vanderbilt was wildly successful and built an empire, that quote is taught as sage wisdom.
He's viewed as a scrappy, bold visionary who refused to let outdated bureaucratic laws stop the march of innovation.
The same exact framing is applied to John D. Rockefeller. I mean, he routinely circumvents the law to build Standard Oil, to the point where a sitting judge literally called his company no better than a common thief.
But because he became unimaginably wealthy, his law flouting is often portrayed by business historians as cunning, aggressive business smarts.
But ask yourself, what if they had failed? What if Vanderbilt's company collapsed under court order and he bankrupted his investors?
He wouldn't be remembered as a visionary. He would just be a flagrant, disgraced criminal.
Exactly. If you fail, society says, well, obviously don't break the law. Because you succeeded, society says, don't let bureaucracy stifle your genius.
It is entirely results-based analysis. We judge the process strictly by the outcome, completely ignoring the role of luck in getting there.
We do this constantly with investing strategies too.
Oh, yeah. Think about Benjamin Graham. He is universally known as the father of value investing. He literally wrote the book on it.
His entire philosophy was built on strict, unemotional rules, demand a massive margin of safety, and rely on wide diversification.
Never put all your eggs in one basket.
Right, that's the whole point of value investing. You hedge your bets.
Exactly. But then Graham broke his own cardinal rule. He took a massive chunk of his partnership's capital, about 25%, and dumped it into a single company, Geico.
It violated everything he taught.
It did. But he thought it was wildly undervalued. And it worked. That single, highly concentrated trade ended up making more money than all of his other meticulously diversified investments combined over his entire career.
So what's the takeaway there? Was breaking his own rules one supremely shrewd decision of a master seeing an unmissable opportunity? Or was it just one wildly lucky break that paid off?
Even Graham himself, looking back, admitted he couldn't easily tell them apart.
And we see this in modern tech all the time. Think about Mark Zuckerberg in 2006. Facebook is still largely a college network. Yahoo comes to him and offers $1 billion to buy the company.
$1 billion. Everyone told him to take it.
But he turned it down. He stuck to his guns, bet on his vision, and today he's hailed as a genius.
But compare that to Yahoo themselves just a few years later. Microsoft offered to buy Yahoo for $44 billion.
$44 billion. And Yahoo turned it down, betting on their own vision.
And they are ruthlessly mocked for it today because their value plummeted afterward. People say they should have cashed out. So what is the actual lesson for a young entrepreneur? Stick to your guns like Zuckerberg, or know when to cash out because you aren't Zuckerberg.
You can't know, because the line between inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless is a millimeter thick, and it is only visible with the benefit of hindsight.
Risk and luck are literal doppelgangers. They look exactly the same until the final result is tallied.
So true.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this analysis offers a very pragmatic, actionable solution. We need to stop studying extreme outliers.
Yes, this is such a good point.
If you want to understand how to build wealth or live a successful life, stop obsessively studying Warren Buffett or Elon Musk or Bill Gates. Their results are so mathematically extreme that the role of luck in their lifetime performance is guaranteed to be incredibly high.
And you cannot emulate luck. You cannot wake up tomorrow and emulate finding a Mother's Club rummage sale in 1968.
Instead, we should look at broad, repeatable patterns. Historian Frederick Lewis Allen wrote extensively about the median American, how the average person lived, worked, budgeted, and navigated the economy.
You get much closer to actionable, replicable takeaways by looking at broad societal patterns than by studying a statistical anomaly.
As Bill Gates himself observed, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose.
And we have to remember that failure can be just as misleading. It seduces smart people into thinking they're good. Statistically sound decisions were actually bad, when really they just caught a bad break on the roulette wheel.
It demands a total, humbling reevaluation of how we judge our path through the physical world.
Okay, so let's pause and synthesize where this leaves us. We have established that our external outcomes, our wealth, our status, our public successes, and our bankruptcies are heavily dictated by a complex, chaotic, physical world,
A world of 7 billion people moving around us.
right? Infinite variables, and the twin invisible forces of luck and risk. Forces entirely outside our control. We are just pieces on the board being knocked around.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But, and this is the massive pivot, if I accept that I can't control the market, I can at least control myself.
Right. Here we go.
Even if the external world is a lottery, I am the master of my internal citadel. I control my own thoughts. I control my own desires. I control my physical movements. Like we said at the start, if I want to make a fist, I make a fist. I have internal agency.
Right. That is the intuitive assumption that keeps us sane. But when we look at our second source, which dives deep into the philosophy of mind, we discover that this internal control might be just as much of an illusion as our external control.
And this is where things get genuinely wild. To understand why your internal control might be an illusion, we have to run headfirst into a 400-year-old philosophical brick wall, the mind-body problem.
This goes all the way back to René Descartes in the 17th century. Descartes championed dualism, the idea that the mind and the body are two fundamentally different kinds of substances.
Which makes sense because it aligns with how we feel.
It does. But think about the fundamental premise of our modern scientific worldview. Biology and physics tell us that we are, essentially, nothing but complex biological systems.
We are structures of material particles, atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organs.
We are physical objects residing in a physical universe, strictly bound by the inflexible laws of physics and chemistry.
But that scientific reality completely contradicts our daily lived reality. There is an unbridgeable gulf between physical matter and conscious experience.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, think about a purely physical biological process, like your digestion or the circulation of blood through your arteries. It's mechanical, it's plumbing and chemistry.
Okay, sure.
Now, contrast that physical process with a mental phenomenon. Think about the rich, aromatic, highly specific smell of fresh basil, or the sharp, sudden pang of remorse when you realize you just hurt a friend's feelings, or the burning, throbbing painfulness of a bruised elbow.
The contrast is staggering. How can something as immaterial, as subjective, and as qualitative as a feeling arise from a purely physical configuration of wet matter?
It's absurd when you really try to visualize it. It's like opening up a computer's hardware, looking at the silicon motherboard, tracing the copper circuits with a magnifying glass, and trying to find the feeling of the software.
You can't do it.
You can look at a human brain under an electron microscope all day long. You can map every single bundle of the 86 billion neurons. You can track every electrical impulse.
Yeah.
But you are never, ever going to find the smell of basil hiding inside a synapse.
No, you won't.
You can't extract a pang of remorse and put it in a petri dish. They seem utterly distinct from mere configurations of material particles.
And philosophy of mind breaks this down further into sensory components versus cognitive components. We just talked about sensory experiences, smells, pains, colors. But what about cognitive states?
Right, like beliefs. What exactly is a belief?
How does a physical, wet, biological organ hold the content that it is raining outside? Or hold the abstract mathematical truth that 7 plus 5 equals 12?
Right, a neuron isn't true or false. It's just a cell. How can a collection of cells hold a proposition?
Exactly. Does a belief require a capacity for speech to exist? Can a speechless animal have a mind in the same way we do? Can an electromechanical robot have a mind?
If a mind is merely a byproduct of complex physical arrangements, is it theoretically possible that the internet, which is just a massive network of electrical signals, could eventually feel a pang of remorse.
It bends the brain to even entertain the question.
He really does. But let's walk through the biology to see how science tries to translate the physical into the mental and where the explanation completely falls short. Let's look at the alchemy of sensation.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine you are walking barefoot across your living room and you step on an upright thumbtack.
An incredibly physical event.
Yes. Mechanically, what happens? The sharp metal thumbtack punctures your skin. This physical damage triggers specific receptors
And then those receptors send an electrical impulse traveling up your leg.
into your spinal cord and deep into your brain, specifically causing neurons in your hypothalamus and cortex to discharge. A physical electric current of sodium and potassium ions rushes across cell membranes.
And then suddenly, boom. Out of nowhere, you experience a vivid, conscious sensation of pain.
Or, take vision. Physical photons of light generated by the sun travel millions of miles, bounce off an object, and impinge on your physical retina.
Which triggers a chain of chemical and electrical events in your optic nerve and visual cortex.
And as a magical result, you suddenly form the intangible belief that there is a tree in front of you.
This raises an important question, the most important question, really. Why? Why should any conscious experience emerge from little particles jostling against each other?
Why does the flow of sodium ions across a lipid membrane equal a conscious feeling?
There is a highly specific, utterly baffling biological point in the text that illustrates this mystery perfectly. We have specific neurons designed to detect damage. They are called nociceptive neurons.
Okay, nociceptive neurons.
When nociceptive neurons fire, we feel pain. We also have another distinct group of neurons designed to detect surface irritants. When those fire, we feel an itch.
But why aren't they switched?
Exactly. Structurally, an action potential, the electrical signal firing in the cell is identical. It's just chemistry. So why does that specific physical arrangement of nociceptive neurons firing equal the agonizing qualitative feeling of pain and not a mild itch?
Or why doesn't it feel like a tickle? Why does a specific chemical reaction in the visual cortex equal the breathtaking qualitative feeling of a brilliant red and purple sunset?
Why does a sequence of olfactory receptor activations equal the nostalgic, melancholic smell of a freshly mown lawn?
There is absolutely nothing in the physics of an electron or a carbon atom that suggests it should ever produce the color purple or the feeling of sadness or the taste of chocolate.
It is like trying to squeeze water from a stone.
The physical matter does not contain the mental experience. Yet somehow, through a process we cannot explain, the mental emerges.
In philosophy, this is often discussed in terms of emergence. The classic analogy is water. A single H2O molecule is not wet. Wetness doesn't exist at the atomic level.
Right.
But when you put billions of H2O molecules together, the property of wetness emerges. Science argues that consciousness is like wetness. Put enough neurons together, and the feeling of pain or remorse simply emerges from the complexity.
But I have a massive problem with that analogy. I understand how wetness emerges, because wetness is just a physical description of how molecules slide past each other. It's still physical.
That's a fair point.
But consciousness isn't like wetness. Consciousness is a completely different dimension. You are trying to say that if you put enough physical gears together, eventually the machine starts feeling sad. It doesn't compute. It's called the hard problem of consciousness for a reason.
And you are right to struggle with it because it leads us to the most critical, reality-breaking problem of all. Up until now, we have talked about how the physical body creates a mental feeling.
The thumbtack creates the pain.
Right. But what about the other way around? What about mental causation? This is the ultimate paradox of agency. This is the core of whether you have any real control over making that fist.
So what does this all mean for our daily lives?
Yeah.
Let's bring it down to the most mundane, relatable example imaginable. The McDonald's conundrum from the text.
Oh, this is a great thought experiment.
I want you to picture this. You are standing on a sidewalk. You look across the street and you see the golden arches of a McDonald's sign. You suddenly feel a mental desire for food.
You form a conscious belief that food is inside that building.
You make a deliberate mental decision to get a burger. And then your physical body moves across the street.
It happens millions of times a day. We don't even think about it. But let's break down the rigid scientific chain of command that just occurred.
Okay, let's do it.
Science says that your beliefs and desires, your mental states, caused physical neurons in your motor cortex to discharge. Those neural impulses traveled through the complex network of neural fibers all the way down your spinal cord to the peripheral control systems in your legs.
Those systems then cause the appropriate muscles to contract, moving your physical mass of bone and tissue across the street.
That sounds like a perfectly reasonable textbook biological explanation.
Yeah.
But look closer. Look at the very first step in that chain.
We just hit a massive philosophical wall. How did a belief or a desire, which are supposed to be intangible, non-physical mental states, manage to cause a physical material neuron to fire in the first place?
That is the unbridgeable gulf. Think about the fundamental laws of physics. The law of conservation of energy states that in a closed system, energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Right. Every physical event must have a physical cause.
If a belief is a mental state, if it is not made of matter, then it has no mass, it has no physical force. It is essentially a ghost.
Right. How can a ghost push a physical atom? How can an immaterial thought, a desire for a Big Mac, open a physical sodium channel in a brain cell?
It shouldn't be able to.
If an immaterial mind reaches into the physical brain and pushes a neuron, it is literally injecting new energy into a closed physical universe. It violates the foundational laws of physics.
So to solve that glaring contradiction, modern science and philosophy usually say, well, the belief isn't a ghost. The belief itself is just a physical happening in the brain. Your desire for food is literally just a specific chemical and electrical state in your frontal lobe. Your mind is your brain.
But wait, if you admit that beliefs, desires, and choices are themselves simply physical processes in the brain, then you trigger an absolute avalanche of terrifying implications.
If we synthesize both of our sources now, the macro world of behavioral economics and the micro world of neurology, the picture becomes incredibly stark.
It really does.
If a belief is just chemistry and physics, then our internal decisions are governed by the exact same physical laws as a rock rolling down a hill.
Oh my God. Because a rock doesn't choose to roll down a hill.
Exactly. Gravity, friction, and momentum force it to roll. It has no choice. If your brain is just a biological machine made of atoms, then your neurons are firing not because a magical, free-willed you chose to fire them.
They're firing because previous physical states inevitably cause them to fire.
Your genetics, the environment you were raised in, the exact temperature of the room you are in, the chemical composition of the breakfast you ate, all of these physical factors created a chain reaction of atomic collisions that resulted in your motor cortex firing.
And this is the grand illusion we have been building toward. This is why we asked you to look at your hand at the beginning of the deep dive.
In part one, we learned that our monumental successes and failures in the external world are heavily governed by physical realities we don't control.
The roulette wheel of luck, risk, where you were born, who you meet, a mountaineering accident, a rummage sale in 1968.
And in part two, we learned that our very desires, choices, and physical actions might just be internal physical realities. Neurons inevitably firing based on a chain of biological dominoes stretching back to before you were even born.
If we are quite literally just atoms being pushed around by other atoms, both outside in the chaotic global economy and inside in the dark, wet machinery of the skull, the entire concept of individual effort is completely upended.
The steering wheel of your life isn't just disconnected from the tires. You aren't even the one deciding to turn it. The turn was decided for you by the unbroken chain of physics and the history of the universe.
It is a staggering, almost vertigo-inducing thing to try and wrap your head around. We've zoomed way out today. We looked at the massive, complex board game of luck and risk that dictates our socioeconomic reality, entirely debunking the myth that anyone is entirely self-made.
And then we zoomed way, way in. We traveled down the microscopic neural fibers of our brains to question how our minds could possibly move our physical limbs without violating the laws of physics, questioning if we are even the conscious authors of our own daily habits.
I know this might sound terrifying. It borders on nihilism at first glance.
But I actually think if you sit with it, it leads to a profound, transformative sense of grace.
Grace, how so?
If we go back to the core takeaway from the behavioral economics text, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Because we lack control over the infinite moving parts of the external world, and because the very mechanism of our internal will is a mind-body mystery wrapped in biological determinism, we have to completely change how we judge each other.
We must leave massive, radical room for forgiveness and understanding when judging failures, both our own failures and the failures of others.
Because if the CEO on the cover of Forbes is largely the product of a one in a million luck collision, and the person struggling with bankruptcy is largely the product of a one in a million risk collision, and neither of them truly engineered the neurons that drove their choices, then arrogance is illogical.
And shame is equally illogical.
Precisely. Empathy becomes the only scientifically and philosophically logical response to a world where control is an illusion.
That is incredible. So I want to leave you with one final thing to mull over as you go about your week. The next time you accomplish something truly great, something you want to brag about, or the next time you fail completely and fall flat on your face, I want you to pause and ask yourself, was it your brilliant, intangible mind exerting its powerful, sovereign will over the physical world?
Or was it just the inevitable, beautiful, tragic collision of a billion invisible atoms playing out a one in a million script that you were lucky enough to witness?
Think about your hands on that steering wheel. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.